Hi, thanks for joining today's masterclass, Designing a Healthy, Comfortable Home Without Costing the Earth. Let's dive straight into it. So, what do you think about when I say a sustainable home? Do you think of glossy pictures in magazines or on Instagram, grand designs perhaps? And then when it comes down to your own home, are you worried that your sustainable ideas would not work out? Are you worried you're going to spend too much money or perhaps too much time focusing on where to put your energy in terms of the sustainable initiatives you put into your home? And then, is the end result guaranteed to be a healthy and comfortable home, the one that you're dreaming of? Well, the truth is, a sustainable home is a personal experience. It will mean different decisions for every individual and solutions to suit every home. And that's what I found with my clients over the years. So, how do you ensure that you get a sustainable home without the overwhelm or the decision fatigue? Well, in the next little while, I'll show you how I have developed a formula which allows me to understand the key areas in the home to improve to make it sustainable and energy efficient. In the next session, in this masterclass, you'll take the guesswork out of sustainable design. You'll learn key areas to focus on for maximum results and a step-by-step process for making it a success. You'll also discover how to make sustainable living both easy and affordable. This formula guarantees success for every project that I do, and it can work for you too. But who am I? So I'm Sarah Fees, a sustainable architect and energy efficiency expert. For the past 20 years, I've been helping people to design comfortable and healthy homes. I've completed 2 renovations myself, focusing on sustainability, and then have sold those homes for a profit. Now I have the privilege of designing our family's own dream home, and we will move into it later next year. I live in the beautiful coastal town of Torquay on the surf coast of Victoria, Australia. So feel free to put the area where you live in the chat. Now I'm taking my knowledge and experience that I've learned over this time in my career to share with a wider audience online, because I believe that everyone deserves a sustainable and healthy home, no matter what your budget, and I can show you the formula of how to get there. I have a lot of experience with Australian home design, of course. However, these principles that I'll cover today apply to all homes across the world, and I know you'll get benefit from it as well. So let's look at what we're going to cover today. In the masterclass, we will cover the 6 key principles for designing a comfortable and healthy home. Each one will be broken down based on affordability, so this formula can even apply for renters. However, it's mainly targeted at homeowners who are ready to make some changes to improve your home's comfort and livability. Stay tuned to the end for a bonus tip for designing a sustainable home. And please feel free to put any questions you have in the chat so I can answer them directly for you. The first key principle I want to talk about is site and orientation. It refers to the placement of your home's location on the site and the relationship to the sun and the prevailing winds. There's some key factors that you'll need to evaluate, such as shading, the prevailing wind direction, and opportunities for passive solar heating over winter. You'll also need to consider natural ventilation and cooling in summer. The strategic placement of your home can dramatically impact its energy efficiency. Facing windows to the sun will capture the winter sunlight for warmth, while well-placed eaves and shading devices can shade your home from the hot sun during summer. The prevailing winds can be used to naturally cool your home. Analysing your site is crucial for a sustainable design, and that is why I start here first. When we think about site and orientation, there's some key questions I want you to ask yourself. Where does the sun rise and set in relation to the rooms in my home? How does that change from summer to winter? Is there any shading from existing trees? Now, this can be something that's a good thing because the shade in summer can block the hot sun from coming into those rooms. However, too much shading in the wrong location in winter can mean that you're not getting any sun into the home. This can lead to a home that's feeling quite cold throughout the year. There's a type of tree called a deciduous tree, which means that it drops its leaves in wintertime, compared to an evergreen tree, which keeps its leaves all year round. Deciduous trees can be ideal energy efficiency devices. They can be placed in a location where they can block the summer sun when they're full of leaves, and then they'll drop their leaves ready for winter to allow the winter sun to come inside. Even an apple tree or a cherry tree are examples of deciduous trees, which not only provide the shading in summer and the sunlight in winter, but also give us delicious fruit as well. It's also good to consider what the prevailing wind direction is. If we can optimize the location of windows in the home, then we can allow them to be open to receive the cooling breezes in summer. This gives us some extra thermal benefit because it means that we don't have to spend money on using an air conditioner to cool our home over summer. The next principle I want to talk about is excellent insulation. This is crucial for maintaining comfortable temperatures inside your home. There's many different types of insulation, and so I'm going to cover some of the key principles here. The main one I want you to think about is called the R value, which is a measure of the resistance to heat flow. All insulation has an R value. In fact, everything has an R value, but we use the metric of R value to measure the insulation levels. Higher R values equal better insulation. You need to look for potential gaps or holes in the insulation. Where there's too many gaps, that actually has an effect of lessening the impact of the insulation. These gaps mean that the heat or the cool you've created inside your home is allowed to transfer out, which we don't want. Ideally, we want your home to perform like an esky. An esky in a hot Australian summer is taken down to the beach, and it allows us to keep our drinks cool inside while it's hot and scorching summertime temperatures outside. And then at the same time, if you take that thermos and you put a lovely hot chocolate in there in the middle of winter, then the thermos actually acts as a way to stop that cold temperature from outside coming in and cooling down your hot chocolate. This is exactly the same kind of insulation principles that we want to include when we're thinking about this in our home. Ideally, it's really important that the insulation is continuous, meaning that we're trying our best to get a continuous line of insulation from the floors, the walls, and the ceiling all around us, in the same way that you would, if you cut an esky straight through the middle, you'd see that wall of insulation, floor of insulation, and then the ceiling of insulation, keeping whatever you've got inside hot or cold as it's required. When we're thinking about insulation, I want to talk about a few different options here with different levels of affordability. And you can see there I've put dollar signs based on how much they might cost you. I've kept it simple here. This is obviously a complex subject, but I want to just cover that one of the cheapest and easiest things you can do is look at your ceiling insulation. Ceiling insulation is so important because, as we know, heat rises. So the heat that we're generating inside our home is going to rise up, and that will come to our ceiling. So that's the most important and the most benefit we're going to get from topping up our insulation is going to be at the ceiling point. The next, perhaps more expensive option might be to look at improving wall insulation. I had a great question come in about this recently from a client, and they were asking how to do wall insulation in their existing walls. I said, it's hard to do unless you're looking at taking off some of the plasterboard internally because you need to get access to the structure, or unless you're looking at taking off the external cladding of the home so you can get a good level of access to the wall frame to be able to install that insulation retrospectively. And then the third most expensive option I want to talk about here is subfloor insulation. Now, it's not always true that it's going to be the most expensive option. However, I've included it in this case because I believe that the subfloor insulation can be hard to access. So that means that trades may charge you more for subfloor insulation installation. You need a certain amount of clearance underneath your house to be able to install insulation. I know particularly in Australian homes, this is a weak point where many older style homes don't have any subfloor insulation, and the hot and cold air is just coming in and out of that home all the time. So it's really important we find ways to prevent that. And as I said in the previous slide, try and create that continuous insulation from the walls, the floors, and the ceiling. Now, the next principle I want to talk about is superior windows. Windows play such a significant role in managing the heat gain or loss. I always say to my clients that you need to think of windows as holes in your wall, because that's essentially what they are in terms of thermal performance. They are a hole in your building fabric, an area where you can't get the insulation that we talked about in the previous slides. So the performance of the windows becomes even more important. Windows are absolutely beautiful and so important in architectural design. But where they are placed and how big they are sized has a huge impact on how sustainable and energy efficient and comfortable the home will be. So I believe it's so important to think about how we are designing our windows and make sure we design them in terms of size and placement, to think about where the sun's going to be coming into the house throughout the day, where the views are going to be located, and also which height we will be looking at the views. For example, if you're sitting at a desk all day and you want to have a window in that room, that's a different height to if you were looking at a room where you might be standing most of the day. There's different views that you'll get from your eye level to be able to connect yourself to the nature outside. It's so important to have beautifully designed windows. It's one of my favorite things to talk about. The key aspects in terms of energy efficiency of windows is to think about the frame material. So there are many different types of frames. One common one that we see in Australia is aluminium frames. Single glazed aluminium window frames are not a good option for windows, and it's unfortunate that we still see them being installed in Australia and in some other countries as well. These type of windows are not very good at keeping the internal air temperature at an acceptable level. The reason is mostly because of the frame material itself. Aluminium, as we know, is a metal, and those kind of metals transfer heat and cold very quickly. That's why aluminium is great for cooking pots, because it heats up very quickly and can cook our food for us. That's exactly what we want. However, when we look at windows, that is not what we want. We don't want the inside temperature and the outside temperature transferring back and forth so quickly. We want to ideally look at a material like timber or UPVC or thermally broken aluminium. These are good options because it means that you won't get a transfer of the outside temperatures coming inside as quickly as you would if you were using just aluminium frames. It's also so important to think about the type of glass. So when you add double glazing, you're adding extra insulation value to the windows. That is so important. And then you look at the placement of different types of coatings. Low E coatings allow different levels of sunlight to come into the room. And so there's a way that we can optimize the placement of those low E coatings if we want to try and keep the sun and the warmth in the house, or we want to try and block that sun and keep it out of the house. It's also really important to think about what is going to be filled in between your layers of glass. There's an argon filling, which is more energy efficient and allows less transfer. That means it essentially has a higher insulation value compared to just having air in between the two frames. I know there's even more advanced energy efficiency options you can look at for in those instances too, such as vacuum sealing between the double pieces of glazing. It's also really important to think about the effectiveness of window coverings. And by that I mean the blinds and also the shades externally that can help us manage heat gain and loss. This is a whole topic in itself, so I'm just going to cover it briefly here. But I do want to say that if you're in a situation in your home where you have single glazed aluminium frame windows, and you're wondering what you can do to improve the performance, then one of the key things you can look at is to get heavy curtains and pelmets. They will help to create a layer of insulation between the window and the internal environment. It's really important to create that barrier there. Some other things to think about would be different types of blinds and shades that may help to insulate the window, such as honeycomb blinds. And when we talk about shades, we're looking at external shades, because our main thing to do in summertime is to make sure that we don't have the sun hitting the glass. When the sun hits the glass and gets into the house, then it's going to be heating up the internal environment. Ideally, we want something that's shading the glass on the outside. That could be a shade that rolls down or rolls out to protect and block the sun. Another option, as we talked about before, is the placement of deciduous or shaded trees that block the sun coming in summertime. Let's talk now about a few of the different levels of window options and how they might be affecting the different prices. So, as I mentioned just previously, one of the cheapest options you can do is adding pelmets and heavy curtains to your window frame. Now, when we think of pelmets and heavy curtains, we might think of a more, heritage style home. However, there are contemporary ways that we can bring in these elements. It's essentially going to create that layer of insulation on the window, as I said. The next thing I want to talk about is improving the window frames. That will increase the cost of the windows. Looking at timber windows or UPVC. UPVC is something that's growing in the Australian market. It's very common, I know, in Europe and America. These options allow the window frames to have a good level of insulation, meaning that they won't be transferring the heat from inside to outside as quickly. And then finally, perhaps the most expensive option here is to look at improving the window glazing, going to double or potentially triple glazing in some climates. There are some other options to consider here, such as secondary glazing, which is about 1/3 the cost of double glazing, where additional perspex elements are attached to the window frames. That may be something to consider for your situation as well. Next, I want to talk about thermal bridge-free design. These thermal bridges are areas in your home construction where heat can transfer between different materials. We've talked about this already. It's a little bit of a physics lesson today. We really want to minimize the heat transfer through considering thermal bridge-free design in the way we're looking at constructing or retrofitting our homes. Thermal bridges can create energy leaks, and so by addressing these areas during construction or renovation, you can significantly improve your home's thermal performance. Proper insulation and sealing techniques around any thermal bridges will help to prevent them from transferring the temperatures outside to the temperatures inside. It's really important that we consider the use of aluminium and steel. These can be used in the home design, but it's really important to think about where they're used and to make sure they are thermally isolated. They're both materials that transfer the outside temperatures to inside more quickly than perhaps timber, for example. Next, I want to talk about airtight construction. A well-sealed home is crucial for optimal performance. Addressing air leaks reduces your heating and cooling needs, it saves you money, and it's creating a more comfortable environment to live in. It's really important to evaluate how well the home will be sealed against unnecessary air leakage. By that, I mean that when you have air inside your home, it's not escaping through gaps and cracks that really don't need to be there. One of the concerns about air leakage or perhaps air coming in from these gaps and cracks is it may be coming from spaces that are not necessarily outside natural air. It may be coming from the wall cavities or from the ceiling spaces. What's concerning about this is that there is a level of dust, there's a level of rodent droppings, there's probably rodent carcasses, any sorts of things that could be stuck within the wall cavities or in the ceiling cavities. And so if we are pulling air from those areas into our home, that's going to affect our indoor air quality. When we think about bringing in air to the home, we want to make sure that it's air that's coming from outside. It's natural air and air that's going to be fresh. That's so important for our health. So it's really good to seal up any unnecessary gaps or cracks with caulking material. Pay particular attention to the seals around windows and doors. They are notorious spots for air leakage coming into the home. It's really important that any old fireplaces have a dampener installed so they're properly sealed up. And very important to seal over the top of any bathroom fans, for example, or range hoods. So a special product can be installed over the top which allows it to open up and allow the air to escape when you've turned on the fan, and also when you've turned off the fan, it will close back down again and seal that up. One interesting thing to note here is that fireplaces were traditionally used to heat the home. However, our technology has advanced so much. So when you were heating a home with a fire, it was so important for it to actually be a leaky home. That meant that the heat and the air that was being created and the smoke and the dust and everything that was coming from the fireplace was allowed to escape out. Now we are creating homes that have much more efficient technology in how they're going to be heated, and they don't need this level of leakiness anymore in order to be efficient. They're essentially assisting us to create a healthier indoor air environment than a fireplace would, for example. Finally, I want to talk about optimal ventilation. This links to the previous topic because it's so important that we have fresh air that's coming into our home. Our home is a source of stale air and moisture-filled air that can build up when we're cooking, when we're showering, from the toilets, from any internal breathing that we're doing, essentially. As we're breathing out this carbon dioxide, we need to make sure that we are pulling those contaminants out of the air and providing fresh air circulation. There's no need why we should have to live in homes that have stale, moisture-laden air. So it's really important that we can focus on these principles for optimal ventilation. I'm always going to promote natural ventilation first. In Germany, there's a principle where every day they will open their homes for a few minutes to let that fresh air in, even in the depths of winter. And I love this principle because it just allows the air in the whole home to essentially be swapped over for fresh air and ensures that there's no buildup of moisture or stale or stagnant air in the home. Then you can look at different types of systems, which I'll cover a bit more on the next slide. I wanted to put them here on this slide so we can look at the different levels of costs that may be involved, and also what you can do with existing homes versus how you could approach it in a new home. So as I've said here, opening windows. I've put a cross through that because there should be no cost involved in opening windows other than your time and remembering to do it. Then next, in terms of the cost implications, I've looked at externally ducting your exhausts. These exhaust fans will be above showers, in bathrooms, and also above cooking areas through the range hood. It's really important that we duct those externally so that they're not going into our ceiling spaces. If we get this kind of moisture-laden air coming into our ceiling spaces, then it can be a way that mold may eventually grow in the ceiling, which is not a good idea for any home, obviously. There's also some systems which are called continuous extraction. They are essentially running a small fan all the time, which is pulling the stale, moisture-laden air out of the home. And that can be accompanied with trickle vents or specific openings, specially detailed openings, which will allow for fresh air to come into the home. As I said previously, we don't want to get any of that air coming into the home from our wall cavities or our ceiling spaces. We want to make sure it's fresh outdoor air. And this is one way that we can do that when we're using a continuous extraction system. And then the third option I want to put here, which is the most expensive option, is looking at energy recovery ventilation systems. Why they are so important and used, for example, in passive house design is because they are a balanced system. And that means they are continually taking out that stale, stagnant air that's laden with moisture and then replacing it with fresh air. There's also systems which have heat recovery ventilation, meaning that when you are creating warm air inside your home, the heat recovery system will actually bring in the fresh air, heat it up to the internal temperature, and then bring it into the home without it actually crossing paths with the stale, moisture-laden air that's being taken out of the home. As I said, these are the most expensive option. However, when you're thinking about the sustainable design of your home, to include systems like this can be very cost effective if you're thinking about it from the start of the design. There's also different types of systems you can use. Some are balanced around the whole home and as a centralized system, and others are decentralized, meaning they're different units around the home that are pushing and pulling the air. These systems can also work really well in some cases. And then the final bonus step that I wanted to mention here, for those that stayed all the way through those first 6 steps, is going all electric. So embracing energy efficiency can be done on top of adding all electric appliances. Now the technology has advanced so much that it's very efficient to use all electric appliances in your home. You can do this for your cooking through induction cooking systems, through your heating systems, through instantaneous heating systems or storage systems connected to a heat pump. And then you can look at different types of solar storage systems connected to heat pumps as well and storage tanks. And then for heating the home internally, a heat pump reverse cycle air conditioning system can be really effective for heating and cooling your home. On top of that, then you can add a PV system. And I'll show you how you can build that up here in the next slide. So I've put these appliances in order of what will be the most effective in terms of the thermal performance in your home and also cost effective. And the first one I want to talk about is your heating system. The reverse cycle air conditioning, heating and cooling systems are going to be the most efficient all electric way to heat and cool your home. Some of my clients talk to me about whether they should install ducted systems. And I don't necessarily recommend ducted systems because if we go back to a few slides earlier, ducted systems can actually contribute to air leakage in the home. As much as we would like the ducts to all be neatly installed and make sure there's no air leakage, that's not necessarily the case. So I think it's really important to look at simple units that are reverse cycle air conditioner systems. The way that I design a home when I'm thinking about this is to put about 2 systems around the home and allow them to push the air around the home. I also think about ways that you can zone the home and different areas to be heated. I've practiced this myself, even in the rental that we're living in currently, and I've found that it works quite well as long as you're achieving a decent level of air sealing in your home to start with. If you've got a leaky home, then when you are putting this hot air into the home, it's just going to be evaporating, going out everywhere through the gaps and cracks. So I do not recommend that. Then with the hot water system, heat pump storage systems are becoming more and more efficient and popular and coming down cheaper to be more cheaper in cost. Highly recommend going to an all-electric heat pump system for your hot water. It's a bit different to some gas systems we have. Gas systems tend to be instantaneous, meaning that you will turn on the tap, the gas will ignite straight away, heat up the water and put it in. Whereas the storage system will actually store that water at a heated temperature and then bring it in. So when that storage system runs out, then you won't have any more hot water in your home until it fills up and heats up again. However, the way that the tanks have been designed means that the systems have plenty of water stored in them. So there's really no need to be concerned about running that storage system down to completely dry. Then I want to mention cooking because it's the heating, the cooling, the hot water systems, and then the cooking in our home that use the most energy. Then cooking systems to go all electric, it's swapping that out to an induction cooktop. They're highly efficient and can heat up water very quickly, much quicker than gas systems. And then we can look at the additional systems you can put on your home to support going all electric, such as a solar photovoltaic or PV system. You can have small to large systems depending on your budget. However, I do recommend that you switch your appliances over to electric before you consider solar. This means that you're going to be able to use that solar when the sun is shining. You'll be able to use that in your home. We're living in a time where the feed-in tariffs used to be quite high, but they are coming down now. So it's really important to think about how you can use the solar energy you're creating in your home. For example, this might be running the washing machine and the dishwasher during the middle of the day when the sun is out. This may be hard if we're not working from home or have our days mostly at home. So there may be some other systems that we might look at. For example, the final point I've got there about storage systems talks about batteries. They're an excellent way to store that solar as it's being created and then can sit there ready to be used in your home. Islanding is something I want to discuss here too, which means that you can ask for your PV to be installed in a way that has this islanding principle so that the solar can be used directly in your home in the case of a blackout. This is very good because it means that you're actually going to be able to hopefully continue to have some level of power in a potential blackout situation. So that's it. Covered lots of different topics here. Now I want to speak a little bit about what's next. Well, you're welcome to come and visit my website, sarahfeast.com, where I've got heaps more sustainable design resources. I'm working on a series of ebooks at the moment, so please stay tuned and I'll let you know when those are coming and they'll be available. You can also book an online consultation with me. Send me an email or a DM. All my details are here on this slide. Anyone who registers to come and see this masterclass, I'll make sure that you get a copy of these slides and all the links in there for anything you need. If you have any questions, as I said, please feel free to put them in the chat so I can make sure I get to them all. I look forward to hearing from you. Thanks so much for attending the presentation today.